Close your eyes for a moment. Take a breath and ask yourself the simplest question in the world. Who are you? Not your name, not your job or your relationships, not the roles you play or the masks you wear, but you, the essential you, the observer behind your eyes, the voice in your head that narrates your life. Who is that? If you're honest, really honest, you'll notice something strange. The more you look for this you, the harder it becomes to find. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror, like trying to taste your own tongue. The thing doing the looking seems to vanish the moment you try to look at it. What if I told you that this difficulty isn't a failure of attention? What if the reason you can't quite grasp who you are is because the you you're looking for doesn't actually exist? At least not in the way you think it does. For thousands of years, philosophers, mystics, and scientists have been circling this unsettling possibility. From the Buddha sitting beneath the Bodhi tree to modern neuroscientists peering into the machinery of consciousness, the message keeps echoing back. The self might be an illusion, a story, a convenient fiction your brain tells itself to make sense of the chaos of experience. But here's what's beautiful about this realization. It's not a tragedy. It's not nihilistic or depressing. In fact, understanding the illusion of self might be the most liberating discovery you ever make. It might be the key to a different kind of peace, a different way of being in the world. Over the next hour, we're going to take a journey together, a slow, winding path through philosophy, neuroscience, and ancient wisdom. We'll explore how the self is constructed, why it feels so real, and what happens when we start to see through it. We'll ask uncomfortable questions and sit with uncertainty. And by the end, perhaps you'll see yourself and everything else a little differently. So settle in, get comfortable, let your mind wander and wonder, because tonight we're going to explore one of the deepest mysteries of human existence, the mystery of you, or rather, the mystery of what you aren't. Chapter 1. The Mystery of I. Think about the last time you said the word I. Maybe it was just a few moments ago. I'm tired. I need to rest. I'm listening to this video. The word slips out so naturally, so effortlessly, that we never question it. But what exactly are we referring to when we say I? There's a peculiar magic in this word. With just one letter, you separate yourself from the entire universe. You draw a boundary, invisible but absolute, between what is you and what is not you. Inside this boundary lives everything you consider yourself to be: your thoughts, your body, your memories, your desires. Outside lives everything else: the world, other people, the stars overhead. But where exactly is this boundary? If you try to find the precise edge of yourself, things get murky surprisingly fast. Is your body you? It seems obvious at first. You feel your body from the inside. You move it with your intentions. When it hurts, you hurt. But your body is constantly changing. The cells in your body are replaced over and over throughout your lifetime. The atoms that make up your skin, your blood, your bones, they flow through you like water through a stream. In 7 to 10 years, almost every atom in your body will be replaced. Are you still you? Or are you like a wave in the ocean, a temporary pattern in perpetual flux? Maybe you is your mind then, your thoughts, your personality, your consciousness. But here, too, the boundaries blur. Your thoughts arise unbidden, don't they? You don't decide what to think next. Thoughts simply appear in consciousness, like clouds drifting across the sky. You can observe them, but can you truly control them? Try not thinking for the next 10 seconds. Try to stop your internal monologue completely. You'll find it's impossible. Thoughts keep coming. So who's thinking them, if not you?
And your personality, that stable sense of who you are, even that shifts with context. You're a different person with your parents than you are with your friends. A different person when you're alone than when you're in a crowd. Which version is the real you? Or are all of them equally real, equally constructed, equally temporary? The philosopher Alan Watts once said that asking, "Who am I?" is like asking, "What does blue taste like?" The question itself might be fundamentally confused. We assume there must be an I at the center of experience, a little person inside the head, watching and deciding. But when we go looking for this person, all we find is more experience, more thoughts, more sensations, more perceptions, but no perceiver, no watcher, just watching. This is the strange loop of self-awareness, consciousness trying to grasp itself, the I trying to see itself. And in this impossibility lies the first hint that something is fundamentally illusory about our most basic assumption, that we exist as solid, separate, continuous entities. The word I creates a grammatical necessity. In English, we need a subject for every sentence. Someone has to be doing the action. But what if this is just a linguistic convention, not a metaphysical truth? What if saying, "I think," is like saying, "It rains"? There's no separate it that does the raining. Rain is just happening. What if thinking is just happening too, without a thinker behind it?
This idea feels dangerous, doesn't it? Almost threatening. Because if there's no I, then who is listening to these words right now? Who will wake up tomorrow? Who is responsible for your actions, your choices, your life? These questions can feel like standing at the edge of an abyss. But that's exactly where we need to begin. In the uncertainty, in the discomfort of not knowing. Because it's only by questioning our most basic assumptions that we can start to see the truth beneath them. So, let's step back in time and see how this question has haunted humanity throughout history. Let's explore how different cultures and thinkers have wrestled with the mystery of I.
Chapter 2. Ancient Questions of Self. Long before neuroscience, before psychology, before the modern study of consciousness, ancient philosophers and mystics were already asking, what is the self? But the answers they arrived at were radically different depending on where you looked. Imagine you're in ancient India, around 700 BCE. The sun rises over the Ganges, and priests chant hymns from the Upanishads, the philosophical texts that form the foundation of Hindu thought. Here, the question of self has a clear answer. You are Atman, the eternal soul. But here's the twist. Atman is not personal. It's not the small you that worries about money or status or what other people think. Atman is the universal consciousness that animates all things. It's identical with Brahman, the ultimate reality. In this view, your true self is not separate from the universe. It is the universe. The feeling of being a separate individual trapped inside a body, moving through time, this is Maya, illusion. Your real nature is infinite, timeless, unchanging. The goal of spiritual practice is to realize this truth. Tat vam asi, thou art that. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean and a drop.
This is a profound form of self-affirmation. Yes, you exist, but you're so much more than you think you are. You're not the small, limited person you take yourself to be.
You're the cosmos itself, experiencing itself through billions of temporary forms. But travel a few hundred miles east and a few centuries forward, and you'll find a completely different answer. Under the Bodhi tree around 500 BCE, Siddhartha Gautama, who would become the Buddha, sat in meditation and came to a startling realization. He saw clearly that there was no permanent, unchanging self at all, no Atman, no soul. What we call the self is Anatta, not self. It's empty of inherent existence. According to the Buddha, what we experience as me is actually a constantly shifting collection of 5 aggregates: physical form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. These 5 elements arise together, dance together for a while, and then dissolve. They're dependent on countless causes and conditions. They change moment by moment. And nowhere in this bundle can you find a core essence, a permanent you. The Buddha taught that clinging to the idea of a solid, separate self is the root cause of suffering. We suffer because we try to protect and promote something that doesn't actually exist. We build walls around nothing and then spend our lives defending those walls. If you can see through this illusion, if you can experientially understand that there's no one there to protect, suffering naturally dissolves. This is not nihilism, though. The Buddha wasn't saying nothing exists. He was saying that everything exists differently than we think it does. Everything, including you, is a process, not a thing, a verb, not a noun. Meanwhile, across the world in ancient Greece, another approach was emerging. Around 400 BCE, Socrates wandered the streets of Athens with his famous maxim, "Know thyself." But what did he mean by this? Was he encouraging people to discover their true nature? Or was he pointing to something more paradoxical? Socrates claimed to know only one thing, that he knew nothing. And this not knowing extended to the self. The Socratic method, asking endless questions, never arriving at final answers, suggests that the self might be more of a mystery than a fact, something to question rather than something to take for granted. Later Greek philosophers like Heraclitus taught that everything flows. You cannot step into the same river twice, he said, for it is not the same river, and you are not the same person. Even in ancient Western thought, there was an understanding that identity is fluid, not fixed.
But here's what's fascinating. Despite their differences, all these ancient traditions were pointing to the same uncomfortable truth. Whether they called it illusion, impermanence, or unknowability, they all recognized that the self is not what it appears to be. The Hindu mystics said your small self is an illusion, hiding your true infinite nature. The Buddhists said there's no self at all, just processes. The Greeks said the self is a mystery that can't be fully known. Different words, different frameworks, but a shared intuition. The ordinary sense of being a separate, solid, continuous I is a kind of misunderstanding. These weren't just abstract philosophical positions. They were lived insights that changed how people related to existence. When you realize you're not separate from the universe, compassion arises naturally, because harming another is harming yourself. When you realize there's no solid self to defend, fear diminishes. When you embrace the mystery of selfhood, life becomes more open, more surprising, more free. For thousands of years, these insights remained primarily in the realm of philosophy and spirituality. But then, Western philosophy began to dissect the problem in a new way, through rigorous analysis and skepticism. And one thinker in particular would shake the very foundations of personal identity.
Chapter 3. The Bundle Theory. David Hume. Picture Scotland in the 18th century. The Enlightenment is in full bloom, and philosophers are trying to build knowledge on solid, rational foundations. René Descartes has declared, "I think, therefore I am," establishing the self as the one thing we can be certain of. But then comes David Hume, a skeptical Scotsman with a devastating question. Are you sure? Hume was a radical empiricist. He believed that all knowledge comes from experience, from what we can directly observe through our senses. So he decided to look for the self the same way you'd look for anything else, through careful observation. He turned his attention inward and searched for this thing called I. And he couldn't find it. Here's how Hume describes it in his Treatise of Human Nature. When I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception or other, of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never can catch myself at any time without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception. Think about this. When you look for yourself, what do you actually find? You find thoughts, emotions, sensations, memories, but you never find the thing that's having these experiences. You never find the self itself. You only find the contents of experience, never the container.
Hume concluded that the self is not a thing at all. It's a bundle, a collection of perceptions loosely tied together by memory and association. Imagine a bundle of sticks held together by string. Each stick is a different perception, a different moment of experience. We mistake the bundle for a single unified thing, but really it's just many separate pieces temporarily connected. This might sound abstract, so let's make it concrete. Think about yourself 10 years ago. Are you the same person? You probably feel like you are. There's a continuity, a sense that the you reading this is the same you that existed back then. But what actually connects you to that past person? Not your body, most of those cells are gone. Not your thoughts, your opinions, beliefs, and personality have likely changed. Not your memories. Some have faded, others have been altered or lost completely. What remains is just a story you tell yourself about continuity, a narrative thread you use to connect different moments of experience into a coherent whole. Hume realized this, and it disturbed him. In his writings, he admits that thinking about the non-existence of the self made him uncomfortable. It felt like standing on unstable ground. But he couldn't deny what his careful observation revealed. There was no solid self to be found anywhere.
Let me give you a thought experiment. Imagine you're watching a movie. On the screen, you see a continuous story, characters moving, speaking, living. But if you could see what's really happening, you'd see it's not continuous at all. It's thousands of individual still frames shown in rapid succession. 24 frames per second, each one frozen, each one separate, but your brain stitches them together into the illusion of smooth motion. Your sense of self works the same way. Consciousness is not a continuous stream. It's more like a series of discrete moments of awareness, arising and passing away incredibly quickly. Your brain takes these separate moments and creates the illusion of continuity. It adds a narrator, a protagonist, a sense of I that persists through time. But that continuity is constructed, not inherent. You can notice this sometimes in moments of distraction or fatigue. Have you ever zoned out while driving and suddenly realized you have no memory of the last few miles? Where were you during that time? The driving was happening, vision was happening, but the usual sense of a central you having the experience was absent, and somehow everything worked fine anyway. Or think about deep sleep. Every night you close your eyes and the sense of self completely disappears. No thoughts, no identity, no I. And yet something keeps your heart beating, your lungs breathing, your body functioning. When you wake up, you assume you're the same person who fell asleep. But really, consciousness has been interrupted. The I has vanished and then been reconstructed in the morning.
Hume's bundle theory strips away the comforting illusion of a permanent self and replaces it with something more honest. You are a process, not a thing. A temporary collection of experiences that arises, changes, and will eventually dissolve. There's no inner essence, no unchanging core, just phenomena bundled together, mistaken for a person. This isn't cause for despair, though. In fact, Hume lived a happy life. He enjoyed good food, good conversation, and good philosophy. He didn't need a permanent self to live well. He just needed to see things clearly. And seeing things clearly means recognizing that what we call I is more like a verb than a noun, not a being, but a becoming, not a thing, but a process of things happening. The self is like a flame. A candle flame looks like a solid, stable thing, but it's not. It's a continuous process of combustion. Fuel, oxygen, and heat creating light and warmth. The flame from 1 second ago is not the same flame as this second. The molecules have changed. The energy has transformed. But we call it the same flame because it maintains a pattern, a recognizable form. You are like that flame, constantly burning, constantly changing, constantly becoming something new while maintaining the pattern we call you. But if Hume is right, if there's no solid self holding everything together, then what exactly gives us this persistent feeling of being someone? Why does the illusion feel so convincing? The answer lies in something even more fundamental: story.
Chapter 4. The Self as a Story. You are a story you tell yourself. Let that sink in for a moment. Not just a story you tell others, though you do that too, but a story you tell yourself, about yourself, every moment of every day. An internal narrative that explains who you are, where you came from, what you want, and where you're going. This story is so constant, so pervasive, that you probably don't even notice it. It runs in the background like software on a computer, organizing your experiences into a coherent plot with you as the main character. Think about how you describe yourself. I'm the kind of person who, I've always been, I'm not good at. Every one of these statements is a piece of your self-story, a narrative element that defines your character, your traits, your arc. But here's what's extraordinary. This story isn't a neutral recording of facts. It's a highly edited, heavily interpreted, emotionally charged reconstruction. You are both the author and the protagonist of a novel that's being written in real time. And like any good author, you take creative liberties with the truth.
Memory researchers have discovered something unsettling. Every time you remember something, you're not accessing a stored file in your brain like opening a document on a computer. You're reconstructing the memory from fragments, filling in gaps, adding details that feel right. And in the process, you're actually changing the memory itself. Studies show that eyewitness testimony, once considered the gold standard of evidence, is remarkably unreliable. People confidently remember events that never happened. They recall details that were suggested to them later. They transform their memories to fit their current beliefs and emotions. Your autobiographical memory, the story of your life, is even more malleable. You remember your past through the lens of your present. If you're happy now, your childhood memories become rosier. If you're depressed, the same memories darken.
You're constantly rewriting your history to make sense of who you think you are today. This means your sense of self, built largely on memory, is unstable. It's a narrative under constant revision. You're not discovering who you are, you're inventing who you are, moment by moment, through the stories you choose to tell.
Think about a major event in your life. Maybe a breakup, a graduation, a move to a new city. How did you understand that event when it first happened? What did it mean to you then? Now think about how you understand it today. The meaning has probably changed, hasn't it? The same event has become a different story with a different significance. This is because you're always interpreting your life from wherever you are right now. You're always looking backward through the filter of your current self-narrative. The past doesn't have one fixed meaning. It has whatever meaning serves your present identity. There's a name for this in psychology: narrative identity theory. It suggests that identity is not a thing you have, but a story you tell. And like any story, it needs certain elements: a protagonist, you; a setting, your life circumstances; conflicts, your struggles; and themes, your values and meanings. Your brain is constantly working to make sure all these elements cohere into a satisfying narrative. When something happens that doesn't fit your self-story, you have a few options. You can integrate it. This challenging experience taught me, transforming it into a plot point in your character development. You can compartmentalize it. That wasn't really me. I wasn't myself that day, treating it as non-canonical. Or you can revise your entire narrative. I used to think I was X, but now I realize I'm Y, essentially rebooting your origin story.
But here's the deeper question. If you're constantly revising your story, constantly reinterpreting your past, constantly constructing and reconstructing your identity through narrative, then which version is the real you? The answer, perhaps, is that none of them are real in an absolute sense. They're all provisional interpretations, useful fictions, ways of organizing the chaos of experience into something manageable. Think about trauma. Traumatic experiences often shatter our self-narrative. They're so intense, so overwhelming, that they don't fit into the story we've been telling about who we are and how the world works. This is why trauma is so devastating. It's not just the event itself, but the way it breaks the continuity of your self-story. Healing from trauma often involves creating a new narrative that can incorporate the experience without letting it define everything. Or think about nostalgia. Why do we feel nostalgic? Often it's not because the past was actually better, but because we remember it through a narrative lens that simplifies and sentimentalizes. We remember the highlights and forget the struggles. We create a story about the good old days that may never have existed quite that way.
Even your plans for the future are part of this story. When you imagine yourself next year, in 5 years, in old age, you're creating a narrative of who you'll become. But that future self is as fictional as a character in a novel. You're inventing them based on who you think you are now and who you hope to be. And when you arrive at that future moment, you'll discover you're different than you imagined. The story continues to change. The spiritual teacher Ram Dass tells the story about his guru, Maharaji, who would sometimes introduce Ram Dass to people in completely contradictory ways. This is my son. This is my father. This is my brother. When asked why, the guru essentially said, all these stories are equally true and equally false. The labels don't capture the reality. They're just convenient fictions for social interaction. The same is true for your self-story. I am a... Whatever you put after those words is a story, not a fact. A role you're playing, not an essence you possess. And you can change the story anytime you want. This is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means you're not trapped by your past or your identity. You can rewrite your narrative.
You can become someone new. But terrifying because it means there's no solid ground beneath you, no true story that captures the real you. Just an endless process of storytelling with no final draft. So, if the self is a story, and stories are constructed, not discovered, then what does this mean for who you really are? To explore that question further, we need to look at what modern science has discovered about the brain. And the findings are even stranger than ancient philosophy or narrative theory could have predicted.
Chapter 5. Neuroscience and the Illusion. If you could shrink down and travel through your own brain, you'd find yourself in the most complex object in the known universe. About 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, creating a network of trillions of synapses, all firing in intricate patterns, all communicating through electrical impulses and chemical messengers. And somewhere in this vast electrochemical storm, you emerge, or at least the feeling of being you emerges. The question is, where? Neuroscientists have been searching for the neural correlates of consciousness for decades. They've mapped the brain in incredible detail, identified which regions handle language, emotion, memory, and decision-making, but they've never found a single location where the self lives. There's no self-center in the brain, no singular seat of identity. Instead, what they find is something much more interesting. The self is a distributed process. It's not located anywhere specific. It emerges from the interactions of many different brain regions, each contributing different aspects of what we experience as being someone.
There's the default mode network, which activates when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming, remembering, planning, or engaging in self-referential thinking. This network creates the narrative sense of self, the story we were talking about in the last chapter. There's the insular cortex, which integrates signals from your body, your heartbeat, your breathing, your gut, creating the felt sense of being an embodied self. This is why emotions feel like they happen in your body, even though they're really patterns in your brain. There's the prefrontal cortex, involved in executive function and decision-making, which creates the sense of being an agent, a chooser, someone in control. All these regions and more work together to generate the unified experience of being you. But it's an integration, not a thing, a process, not a place. Take away any one component, and the sense of self changes, but doesn't disappear. It's like asking, where is the internet? It's not in any one place, it's in the connections between places. One of the most fascinating discoveries in neuroscience came from studying patients with split brain syndrome. These are people who, usually to treat severe epilepsy, had the connection between their brain's two hemispheres surgically severed. After the surgery, it's as if they have two separate consciousnesses in one skull.
In experiments, researchers can show an image to just the left eye, which sends information to the right hemisphere. When asked what they saw, the patient says they didn't see anything, because the left hemisphere, which controls language, didn't receive the information. But if you ask the patient to point with their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, they point to what they saw. Even stranger, when researchers show a command like walk to only the right hemisphere, the patient stands up and starts walking. When asked why, the left hemisphere, which didn't see the command, instantly invents a reason. Oh, I wanted to get a drink of water. The left hemisphere acts as an interpreter, constantly creating explanations for behaviors it didn't actually initiate. This is profound. It suggests that much of what we call self is actually just post hoc rationalization. Your brain does something, and then your conscious mind creates a story about why you chose to do it. The sense of being a unified self making deliberate choices is, at least partially, an illusion maintained by your brain's interpreter function.
Consider the famous experiments by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s. He asked people to make a spontaneous decision to move their hand and note the exact moment they felt they'd made the decision. Meanwhile, he monitored their brain activity. What he found shocked the scientific community. Brain activity indicating the decision to move occurred about half a second before the person consciously felt they'd decided to move.
Your brain initiates the action before you consciously experience deciding to act. The feeling of consciously willing something is actually a retrospective experience, your brain telling you about a decision that's already been made. Now, there's considerable debate about what these findings mean for free will and consciousness. But what's clear is that the sense of being a conscious agent who chooses and acts is not as straightforward as it feels. Much of what you think of as your choices are actually arising from unconscious processes that you then claim ownership of after the fact. The brain is also remarkably good at creating continuity where none exists. You experience vision as smooth and continuous, but actually, your eyes make rapid movements called saccades about 3 to 4 times per second. During these movements, you're functionally blind. Your brain suppresses the visual input because it's just motion blur. But you never notice these gaps. Your brain fills them in, creating a seamless visual experience. The same is true for consciousness itself. There are constant gaps, moments of distraction, microsleeps, shifts in attention, but your brain edits them out. It creates a highlight reel and presents it to you as if it's real-time footage. The continuity of self is similar. Your brain takes discrete moments of experience and stitches them together into the illusion of a continuous you.
Memory works this way too. You don't actually store memories like files on a hard drive. Each memory is distributed across multiple brain regions. When you remember something, your brain reactivates the same neural patterns that were active during the original experience, but not perfectly. It's more like a cover band playing a song than the original recording. Close enough to recognize, but not identical. And here's the crucial point. Every time you remember something, you're changing it slightly. Memory is not retrieval, it's reconstruction. You're literally remaking the past every time you remember it. So the you that existed in the past is not preserved anywhere in your brain. It's recreated, imperfectly, every time you remember it. There's a condition called Cotard's delusion, where people believe they're dead or don't exist. It often occurs when the emotional centers of the brain become disconnected from the perceptual centers. The person sees the world, recognizes things, but doesn't feel any emotional resonance. The lack of feeling creates the bizarre conviction that they must be dead. It's a reminder that the sense of existing, the feeling of being alive and real, is itself a construction that can break down. Similarly, in some forms of depersonalization, people report feeling like they're watching their life from outside their body, like they're not really the one living it. The machinery of self becomes visible because it's malfunctioning. These conditions show us that the sense of being someone is not a given. It's actively generated by specific brain processes. And when those processes go wrong, the self becomes strange, distant, or disappears altogether.
All of this points to a conclusion that's both unsettling and fascinating. The self is not what it seems. It's not a little person inside your head watching and controlling. It's a process your brain generates to help you navigate the world. A useful fiction maintained by constant neural activity, and illusion in the most literal sense. Not because you don't exist, but because you exist differently than you think you do. Neuroscience confirms what Hume suspected and what the Buddha taught. There's no unchanging essence at the core of your being. There's just the brain, doing its extraordinary work of creating the experience of being someone. But this raises a question. If the self is an illusion, why does the illusion exist? What purpose does it serve? To understand that, we need to return to the tradition that's been saying this all along, Buddhism, with its profound teachings on no self and the freedom that comes from seeing through the illusion.
Chapter 6. The Buddhist View. The Freedom of No Self. Imagine sitting in meditation for hours, days, weeks. Your mind gradually becomes quiet, still, like a pond whose surface has stopped rippling. And in that stillness, you begin to see more clearly. You notice thoughts arising and passing away like clouds. You notice sensations in your body appearing and disappearing. You notice that everything is in constant flux, never staying the same for even a moment. And then you notice something else. There's no one watching this. There's just watching. No self observing the thoughts and sensations. Just thoughts, sensations, and awareness, all arising together, all empty of any permanent essence. This is the insight at the heart of Buddhism, Anatta, or no self. But it's crucial to understand what this means, because it's easily misunderstood. Anatta doesn't mean you don't exist. That would be nihilism, and the Buddha explicitly rejected nihilism. You clearly exist in some sense. Thoughts are happening, sensations are arising, actions are occurring. What Anatta means is that you don't exist in the way you think you do. You don't exist as a permanent, independent, unchanging entity separate from the rest of reality. The Buddha taught that everything exists in a web of interdependent causation. Nothing has independent existence. Everything arises because of conditions, and when those conditions change, the thing changes or ceases. This is true for all phenomena, including what we call the self.
Think of a wave in the ocean. A wave appears to be a distinct thing. You can point to it, watch it move, see it crash on the shore. But what is a wave, really? It's not separate from the ocean. It's a temporary form that water takes because of wind, gravity, and other forces. The wave doesn't have independent existence. It's inseparable from the ocean, from the weather, from the moon's gravitational pull. You are like that wave. You appear to be a distinct individual, but you're not separate from the world. You're a temporary pattern that the universe is making, arising because of countless causes and conditions. Your parents, your culture, the food you eat, the air you breathe, the light from the sun. Remove any of these conditions, and you would not exist. The Buddha analyzed the self into 5 aggregates, or skandhas: form, body; feeling, perception; mental formations; and consciousness. He asked, which of these is the self? Is your body the self? No, because it changes constantly. Are your feelings the self? No, they come and go. Are your perceptions, your thoughts, your consciousness? None of them are permanent or independent. They're all processes, all dependent on conditions, all in flux. So where's the self? Nowhere. It's not that there's nothing there. All the aggregates are there. But there's no separate you who possesses them. There's just the process of them arising and passing away, bound together temporarily, creating the illusion of a continuous person.
Here's what's radical about this insight. If there's no fixed self, then all the suffering that comes from protecting and promoting the self becomes unnecessary. You suffer because you identify with things that are impermanent. You think, I am this body, and then the body ages and you suffer. You think, I am my accomplishments. And when you fail, you suffer. You think, I am separate from others. And you feel lonely, competitive, afraid. But if you can see that there's no solid self to protect, suffering begins to dissolve. Not because life stops having pain, pain is part of the human condition, but because the extra layer of suffering we add through identification falls away. The Buddha made a distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. The body gets sick, people die, things don't go as planned. But suffering is optional. Suffering comes from resistance, from clinging, from wanting things to be different than they are. And clinging is only possible if you believe there's a self that can possess or lose things. Imagine holding an ice cube in your hand. It's cold. It starts to hurt. That's pain, an unavoidable physical sensation. Now imagine you believe you must hold on to this ice cube at all costs, that your value as a person depends on not dropping it. That's suffering, the mental anguish added on top of the pain by the story you're telling yourself about what it means.
When you realize there's no solid self to protect, you can simply let the ice cube go. The pain was real, but the suffering was optional. It existed only in relation to a self that was never truly there. This is why meditation is so central to Buddhist practice. Meditation isn't about achieving some special stage or becoming a better person. It's about seeing clearly, about observing your own experience directly, without the filter of concepts and beliefs. And what you might find is both everything and nothing. Everything is happening. Sounds, sights, thoughts, sensations, but no separate you experiencing it. Just experiencing, just being, just this. The mystics have a word for it, emptiness. But emptiness doesn't mean absence. It means empty of inherent, independent existence. Everything is empty, including you, but that emptiness is also fullness. It's the openness that allows everything to appear, the space in which life unfolds. You are that space, and you are what appears in that space. You are both the stage and the actor, the mirror and the reflection, the ocean and the wave. Trying to separate them, trying to be one or the other, creates confusion. But seeing them as inseparable, that's where peace lives. So, who are you, really?
Maybe the question itself is the problem. Maybe asking who assumes there's a definable entity to identify. Maybe the answer is not a who, but a what. Not a noun, but a verb. Not a conclusion, but an ongoing question. Not something you figure out once and for all, but something you discover fresh in every moment. You are this breath, this heartbeat, this awareness, this moment of being alive. And in the next moment, you'll be something else. And that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. That's what being alive means. Constant change, constant becoming, constant flow. The illusion of self is not something to destroy or transcend. It's something to see through, to hold lightly, to use when useful, and release when it's not. Like a mask you wear in a play, you can put it on, perform your part, and take it off again without ever believing you are the mask. And in that lightness, that flexibility, that freedom, there is peace. Not the peace of having found the answer, but the peace of no longer needing one. Not the peace of permanent security, but the peace of accepting impermanence. Not the peace of knowing who you are, but the peace of not needing to know. Because in the end, after all the philosophy and science and searching, you're still just here, present, aware, alive. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that was always enough. Maybe you never needed to be more solid, more permanent, more defined than this.
The waves keep rolling onto the shore, each one unique, each one temporary, each one made of the same ocean. And you are like those waves, arising from mystery, expressing something beautiful and brief, and returning to mystery again. There's nothing to fear in that, nothing to resist. It's simply what is, what has always been, what you have always been, beneath the story you were telling yourself. So let the story soften, let the boundaries blur, let the solid self dissolve just a little, just enough to feel the freedom that was always there, hidden in plain sight. You don't really exist, not in the way you thought you did. And that's the most liberating truth you could ever discover. Because if you don't exist as a solid, separate, permanent thing, then you're free. Free to change. Free to love without possessing. Free to live without the crushing weight of always having to be someone. You're free to simply be. Whatever that means in this moment. Whatever arises. Whatever flows.
And in that freedom, in that openness, in that willingness to be nothing and everything at once, there is a peace deeper than any the separate self could ever know. A peace that doesn't come from having or achieving or becoming. A peace that was always here, waiting patiently for you to stop searching long enough to notice it. The illusion of self, it's not a problem to solve. It's a mystery to inhabit, a dance to participate in, a dream to lucidly dream. And when you stop fighting it, stop trying to make it something solid and permanent and real, it becomes beautiful. The whole play of existence becomes beautiful. You become beautiful. Not because you found your true self, but because you stopped looking. Not because you've become someone special, but because you've realized you never needed to be. You were always enough, right here, right now, exactly as you are, empty and full, nothing and everything, the dreamer and the dream. And perhaps, just perhaps, that's who you really are, the space in which it all happens, the awareness in which life unfolds, the mystery experiencing itself through eyes that will one day close and forms that will one day dissolve, only to arise again as something else, somewhere else, somehow else.
But for now, for this precious, improbable now, you are here, reading these words, breathing this breath, being this moment of existence. And whether you call that a self or no self, whether you call it illusion or reality, doesn't really matter. What matters is this. Are you present? Are you open? Are you free? Because if the answer is yes, even just a little bit yes, then you've understood something that all the philosophy in the world can't teach. Something that has to be lived, not learned. Something that has to be felt, not thought. The illusion of self is seen through not by analysis, but by relaxation, not by effort, but by release, not by becoming someone who understands, but by letting go of the need to be someone at all. So rest now. Let these words dissolve like morning mist. Let the questions float away like clouds. Let the search for yourself end in the recognition that there was never anyone to find. Just this eternal, ever-changing, always present awareness, being whatever it is in this moment.
You are that. And you are so much more than that. And you are nothing at all. And all of these statements are equally true and equally false because words can't capture what you are. Only silence can. Only presence can. Only this quiet moment, right now, can. So be here. be this. Be whatever you are when you're not trying to be anything. And know that this, exactly this, is enough, has always been enough, will always be enough. The self is an illusion, and the illusion is beautiful, and you are both and neither and everything in between. Rest in that paradox, find peace in that mystery, and let yourself be free. Just this, just now, just being. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more was ever needed. You are home.
May you rest well. May you sleep deeply. May you wake tomorrow with just a little less burden, a little more space, a little more freedom to be whatever you are. Thank you for joining this journey. Thank you for questioning. Thank you for being willing to look at the deepest mystery of all, the mystery of you. Or rather, the mystery of what you aren't. Sweet dreams. See, when you look closely enough, is that the self you've been carrying around is like a heavy backpack you never needed to pick up in the first place. In meditation, you might notice a thought arise. I'm not good at this. Watch carefully. Where did that thought come from? Did you choose it? Can you control when the next thought appears? If you observe honestly, you'll see that thoughts just arise by themselves. There's no thinker authoring them. Just thinking, happening on its own. Or you might notice a sensation, an itch, a pressure, a warmth. Who is feeling it? If you look for the feeler, you'll only find more sensations. The feeling and the awareness of the feeling arise together. There's no separate you standing apart from experience. There's just experience, happening.
This direct seeing is called vipassana, or insight meditation. It's not a belief system or a philosophy you adopt. It's a practice of looking so carefully at your own experience that the illusion of self becomes transparent. Like looking at a movie screen and suddenly seeing not just the images, but the pixels, the light, the screen itself. And here's what's beautiful. When the illusion of self becomes transparent, you don't disappear. Life doesn't become empty or meaningless. Instead, everything becomes more vivid, more immediate, more alive, because you're no longer experiencing everything through the narrow filter of, how does this affect me? Without a solid self to defend, compassion arises naturally. If there's no fundamental boundary between you and others, if we're all temporary waves in the same ocean, then causing harm to another is recognized as causing harm to yourself. Not as a moral principle you have to force yourself to follow, but as an obvious truth you can see directly. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh uses the term interbeing to describe this. You don't exist separately, you inter-are with everything else. The apple you ate for breakfast is now part of your body. The oxygen you're breathing was recently inside a tree. The words in your mind came from other people. Where does the boundary of you actually end?
This understanding doesn't lead to passivity or detachment. The Buddha didn't sit under the tree forever. He got up and taught for 40 years, helping others see what he'd seen. Actions still happen, compassion still flows, life still unfolds, but without the sense of a separate self who must control everything, who must make everything work out according to plan. There's a Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Life continues. Tasks still need doing, but the relationship to it all changes. The grasping loosens. The anxiety about whether I am doing it right, whether I am good enough, whether I will be okay, that starts to quiet down. This is the freedom of no self. Not freedom from life, but freedom within life. Not escaping experience, but relaxing into it. Not becoming nothing, but realizing you were never the separate, solid thing you thought you were in the first place. And the beautiful paradox is this. When you stop trying so hard to be someone, you become more fully yourself. When you stop defending the boundaries of your identity, you become more open, more spontaneous, more alive. The contracted sense of me relaxes, and what remains is simply presence, awareness, being. Call it what you want. The words don't matter. What matters is the direct experience of it. But Buddhism isn't the only tradition that recognized the constructed nature of identity. Western existentialism, though it approached the question from a different angle, arrived at similar conclusions about the self and offered its own path to freedom through authenticity rather than dissolution.
Chapter 7. Existentialism and the Self. Picture Paris in the 1940s. The cafes are full of cigarette smoke and heated philosophical debates. The world has just witnessed unprecedented horror. 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb. Traditional sources of meaning, God, country, tradition, have been shaken to their foundations. And in this atmosphere of uncertainty, a new philosophy emerges, existentialism. At its core, existentialism asks, if there's no God, no cosmic plan, no predetermined essence to human nature, then what are we? How do we find meaning? How do we live? The answer the existentialist gave was both terrifying and liberating. We are radically free. We're not born with a fixed nature or essence. Instead, we create ourselves through our choices and actions. As Jean-Paul Sartre famously put it, existence precedes essence. Think about a knife. A knife has an essence, a purpose that precedes its existence. Someone imagines what a knife should do, designs it accordingly, and then creates it. The knife's essence, cutting, comes before its existence, being made. But humans, according to existentialism, are the opposite. We exist first, we're thrown into the world, and only then do we create our essence through how we choose to live. There's no predetermined blueprint for what a human should be, no instruction manual, no inherent purpose, just existence, and the freedom to make of it what we will.
This is what Sartre called radical freedom, and it's both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating because it means you're not trapped by your past, your biology, or your circumstances. You can always choose differently. You can always become someone new. But terrifying because it means there's no escape from responsibility. You can't blame your genes, your parents, your society, or God for who you are. You are, in every moment, choosing yourself into being. This connects directly to our question about the self. If there's no fixed human essence, then there's no fixed you either. You're not discovering who you are, you're creating who you are through every choice you make. The self is not a noun but a verb, not a being but a becoming. But here's where existentialism diverges from Buddhism. While Buddhism says the self is an illusion to be seen through, existentialism says the self is a project to be created. You don't exist yet. You're always in the process of making yourself exist. Sartre wrote that we are condemned to be free. Condemned because we can't escape the burden of choice. Even not choosing is a choice. Even denying your freedom is a free act. You can't not be responsible for your existence. This leads to what Sartre called bad faith, the act of pretending you're not free. When you say, I had no choice, or that's just how I am, or I couldn't help it, you're lying to yourself. You're treating yourself like a thing with a fixed nature, rather than a free being who's choosing in every moment.
Think about the roles you play. Employee, parent, friend, partner. These roles come with expectations, scripts, behaviors.
It's tempting to hide inside these roles, to let them define you, to say, I'm just doing my job, or this is what a good parent does. But existentialism says, you chose that role. You're choosing to continue it, and you could choose differently at any moment. This doesn't mean all choices are easy or that there aren't real consequences. It means you're always the author of your life, even when the circumstances are difficult. Even in extreme situations, Sartre wrote much of this philosophy during the Nazi occupation, you still have the freedom to choose your attitude, your response, your values. Friedrich Nietzsche, a predecessor to the existentialists, put it even more dramatically. He said that with the death of God, the collapse of traditional religious meaning, humans face a crisis. We can either fall into nihilism, believing nothing matters, or we can become creators of our own values. We can become, in his words, Übermenschen, overhumans, or self-overcomers, who take full responsibility for creating meaning in a meaningless universe. Nietzsche challenged people to live with what he called amor fati, love of fate, not passive acceptance, but an active embrace of your life, exactly as it is, including all its pain and difficulty. To love your life so much that you'd be willing to live it again and again, eternally, exactly the same way. This requires seeing yourself not as a victim of circumstances, but as the artist of your own existence.
Albert Camus, another existentialist, used the myth of Sisyphus to illustrate this. Sisyphus is condemned to push a boulder up a mountain forever. Every time he reaches the top, the boulder rolls back down, and he has to start again. It's absurd, meaningless. And yet, Camus says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because Sisyphus can choose his attitude toward his task. He can rebel against the absurdity by finding meaning in the struggle itself. The point isn't the destination, the top of the mountain. The point is the act of pushing, the moment-to-moment experience of living, of choosing to continue despite the absurdity. This is the existentialist answer to the illusion of self. Yes, there's no fixed essence, no predetermined meaning. But that's not a tragedy, it's an opportunity. You get to decide who you are. You get to create your own meaning. You get to live authentically, in alignment with values you've chosen for yourself, rather than inherited from others. Authenticity is the key word here. To be authentic means to take ownership of your freedom and your choices. It means acknowledging that you're creating yourself in every moment. It means not hiding behind roles, excuses, or the expectations of others. Sartre gives the example of a waiter in a cafe who plays the role a bit too perfectly, overly formal, exaggerated gestures, mechanically efficient. The waiter is in bad faith, pretending to be a thing, a waiter, rather than a person who happens to be waitering. An authentic waiter would acknowledge their freedom. They're choosing to wait tables, they could quit at any moment, and they're a full human being who happens to be working right now, not reducible to their job.
The same applies to all your identities. You're not just anything. You're a free being who's temporarily taking on certain roles and characteristics. And the moment you forget that, the moment you think this is just who I am without recognizing you're choosing it, you've fallen into bad faith. This existentialist view of self can feel heavy. If you're always choosing yourself into being, if there's no essence to fall back on, if authenticity requires constant awareness and responsibility, then there's no rest, no solid ground. You're always in motion, always becoming, always free, and therefore always responsible. But there's also profound liberation in this. You're not stuck. Your past doesn't determine your future. Your mistakes don't define you. Every moment is a new opportunity to choose, to create, to become. And interestingly,
This existentialist freedom points toward the same insight as Buddhist no-self. The you think you are is not fixed. It's not a thing. It's a process of continuous creation. Whether you frame it as seeing through the illusion or creating yourself freely, the conclusion is similar. You are not what you think you are. You are something more fluid, more open, more free. But all of this philosophy, ancient and modern, Eastern and Western, still leaves us with deep questions. Questions that become even more pointed when we turn them into thought experiments. So let's play with some paradoxes and see what they reveal about the strange nature of identity.
Chapter 8. Thought Experiments. Let's imagine something strange. Let's imagine you own a boat, a beautiful wooden boat that you love. You take it out on the water every weekend, maintain it carefully, know every plank and nail. One day, a plank rots and needs to be replaced. You replace it. The boat is still your boat, right? A few months later, another plank needs replacing. Then another. Then the mast. Then the rudder. Over years, you replace every single piece of the boat. Not one original plank remains. Here's the question. Is it still the same boat? This is the ship of Theseus, one of the oldest thought experiments in philosophy, and it goes directly to the heart of identity and continuity. If everything has been replaced, in what sense is it the same ship? The material is completely different, the physical continuity is broken, and yet there's something that makes you want to say, yes, it's still the same boat. The form is the same, the function is the same, your relationship to it is the same.
But now imagine this. Someone collected all the old planks as you replaced them, and they assembled them into a boat, the original boat, made from all the original materials. Now, which boat is the ship of Theseus? The one you've been continuously using and replacing, or the one made from all the original parts? You are facing this exact paradox right now. Your body is a ship of Theseus. The atoms that compose you are constantly being replaced. The cells are constantly dying and being renewed. In about 7 to 10 years, nearly every atom in your body will be different. The physical material of you will be completely new. So are you the same person you were 10 years ago? What provides the continuity? Not the matter, that's changed. Not your memories, many have faded or been altered. Not your beliefs or personality, those have evolved. What exactly makes you, you, across time? Maybe it's the pattern. Even though the atoms change, they maintain a similar organization. Like a river, the water is always different, but the river remains. Or like a whirlpool, the water flows through it, but the whirlpool maintains its shape and location.
But patterns can change, too. Slowly, gradually, you become a different person. At what point do you stop being you and become someone else? Is there a threshold, or is it like the paradox of the heap? At what point does removing one grain of sand make a heap not a heap? There's no clear line, just gradual change that eventually results in something different. Let's try another thought experiment, even stranger. Imagine technology advances to the point where we can scan your brain in perfect detail, every neuron, every connection, every pattern. We then destroy your original brain and body, painlessly, in your sleep, and use the scan to create a perfect physical replica on Mars, atom for atom identical. Same memories, same personality, same everything. The person who wakes up on Mars remembers going to sleep on Earth. They remember being you. They have all your memories, all your traits. From the inside, there's perfect continuity of experience. Are they you? Most people's intuition says no, you died, that's a copy. But why? What's the relevant difference? If continuity of memory and personality is what makes you you, then the Mars person is you. They have that continuity. But if physical continuity matters, if the specific atoms or the continuous causal chain matters, then you died and a replica was created.
Here's where it gets even more troubling. What if we don't destroy the original? What if we just create the copy on Mars? Now there are two of you. Both have equal claim to being you. Both have your memories and personality. Which one is really you? Or are both of you equally you? But that's strange. You can't be in two places at once, can you? This thought experiment, variations of which appear in philosophy as the teletransportation paradox, reveals how unclear our concept of identity really is. We assume identity is simple and obvious, but it's not. It depends on what criteria we think matter: physical continuity, psychological continuity, memory, soul, or something else entirely. Now imagine this. You're actually a brain in a vat. Your brain sits in a laboratory somewhere, suspended in liquid, connected to a supercomputer that feeds it electrical signals. Every sight, sound, sensation, memory you've ever had was simulated. Your entire life, everything you think you know, is a program running on a computer. The you think you are, the person with a body, a history, relationships, doesn't exist. There's just a brain being fed sensations. How would you know if this were true? You couldn't. By definition, if the simulation is perfect, there's no way to detect it from the inside. Your memories of childhood, of learning to walk, of your first kiss, all could be implanted 5 minutes ago. You'd have no way to tell. This is Descartes' evil demon modernized. And while it might seem like paranoid science fiction, it raises a serious question. What is it that you're really certain of? Descartes concluded you can only be certain that you exist as a thinking thing. I think, therefore I am. But notice, even Descartes couldn't say what that I is, just that thinking is happening.
All external reality could be illusion. Your body could be illusion. Your memories could be illusion. But the fact that experience is happening, that can't be illusion. Even an illusion is a kind of experience. As the philosopher George Berkeley put it, to be is to be perceived. Maybe all that really exists is perception itself, and everything else, including yourself, is patterns within that perception. Here's one more. Imagine you go to sleep tonight, and during the night, someone replaces you with a perfect duplicate, not just physically, but mentally. Same memories, same personality, same everything. But it's not you. It's a different entity. A different what? A different soul? A different consciousness? The next morning, this duplicate wakes up believing it's you. It has all your memories, including the memory of going to sleep last night. Would anyone notice? Would your loved ones know? Would the duplicate itself know? The answer seems to be no. There would be no detectable difference. But does that mean nothing changed? Or does it mean that whatever we think makes us us isn't what we thought it was? These aren't just abstract puzzles. They point to something real. Our concept of personal identity is built on unstable foundations. We assume we're continuous entities persisting through time, but we can't actually point to what provides that continuity. We assume we're distinct from others, but the boundary is fuzzy. We assume there's a real us underneath all the changes, but we can't find it. The thought experiments don't give us answers. They do something more valuable. They reveal the questions. They show us that identity is stranger, more fragile, more mysterious than our everyday experience suggests. And in that mystery lies an opening, a crack in the certainty through which we might glimpse something deeper about what and who we really are. Or rather, what we really aren't. But philosophy and thought experiments can only take us so far. Eventually, we have to ask, so what? If the self is an illusion, if identity is unstable, if I am not what I thought I was, how do I actually live with that? What does it mean for daily life, for relationships, for the practical business of being human? That's what we need to explore next.
Chapter 9. Living Without a Self. So here you are. You've journeyed through ancient wisdom and modern science, through philosophy and neuroscience, through paradoxes and thought experiments. And maybe, just maybe, you've glimpsed something strange. The you you've always taken for granted might not exist in the way you thought. Now what? This is where the rubber meets the road, because understanding the illusion of self intellectually is one thing. Living with that understanding is something else entirely. And contrary to what you might fear, living without a fixed self doesn't lead to chaos, nihilism, or the collapse of meaning. In fact, it might lead to the opposite: more freedom, more compassion, more peace. Let's start with the most basic question. If there's no solid self, who's making decisions? Who's responsible for actions? Who's living this life? The answer is simpler than it sounds. Life is living itself through the pattern you call you. Decisions are being made, but not by a separate decision maker standing apart from the process. The decision and the decider arise together. They're not two different things.
Think about catching a ball. When a ball is thrown to you, you don't consciously calculate trajectory, velocity, and timing. You don't think, I, the controller, am now instructing my hand to move to coordinates X, Y, Z. You just catch it. The body-mind system responds fluidly, automatically, intelligently. The catching happens without a separate you micromanaging it. Living is like that. Moment to moment, the organism responds to circumstances. Thoughts arise, feelings arise, actions arise. There's intelligence operating, but it's not separate from the process. It's not a puppeteer pulling strings. It's the whole system functioning as one integrated flow. This doesn't mean you're not responsible for your actions. Responsibility doesn't require a metaphysical self. It just requires acknowledging that actions have consequences and that the pattern called you is the source of certain actions. When you harm someone, even without a solid self, that harm is real. The consequences are real. Taking responsibility means recognizing this and responding appropriately, making amends, changing behavior, growing. In fact, letting go of the solid self can make you more responsible, not less, because you're no longer defending an ego. You're no longer protecting a fixed identity. You can acknowledge mistakes more easily. You can change more freely. You're not trying to maintain the fiction that you've always been consistent or always been right.
What about relationships? Don't they require a stable self? Don't people need to know who you are? Actually, the most honest relationships might be those that recognize no one is fixed. Think about the people you've known for years. Haven't they changed? Haven't you? The healthiest relationships are flexible enough to allow for change. They don't trap each other in rigid identities. They meet each other freshly in this moment, rather than relating to outdated stories about who someone is. When you stop clinging to a fixed self, you can also stop demanding that others remain fixed. Your partner doesn't have to be the person I married forever. Your child doesn't have to fulfill your expectations of who they should be. People are allowed to grow, change, surprise you, because you recognize that you're doing the same. And paradoxically, relationships can become more intimate when there's less self involved. Usually when you interact with someone, there's a constant undercurrent. How am I coming across? Do they like me? Am I impressing them? Am I being respected? It's exhausting. But when there's less fixation on defending and promoting a self, you can simply be present with the other person. You can listen more fully. You can care more freely. Because it's not all about you anymore.
Compassion becomes more natural, too. The usual boundaries between self and other become porous. Suffering is just suffering, whether it's happening here or there. When someone else is in pain, you feel it not because you're a good person trying to be compassionate, but because the artificial separation has thinned. Their pain is just pain, arising in consciousness, calling for a response. This is what the Buddhists mean by emptiness is form, form is emptiness. Everything is empty of separate, independent existence, but that doesn't make things disappear. The world is still here. People are still here. Love, beauty, kindness, all still here. They just exist differently than we thought. They exist as interconnected processes, not isolated entities. What about meaning? If there's no solid self, what's the point of anything? Here's the beautiful twist. Meaning doesn't require a permanent self. In fact, a permanent self might actually limit meaning. If you're locked into a fixed identity with fixed goals and a fixed narrative, life has to conform to that story to feel meaningful. But if you're free from that fixation, meaning can arise spontaneously from whatever is happening right now. You don't need a grand life purpose to feel that washing dishes is meaningful when you're fully present to the warmth of the water, the satisfaction of making something clean. You don't need an ultimate goal to feel that a conversation with a stranger is meaningful when you're genuinely connecting, sharing a moment of understanding.
Meaning is not something you impose on life from the outside. It's something that arises naturally when you're fully engaged with what is. And full engagement is easier when you're not constantly filtering everything through the question, what does this mean for me? This also changes how you relate to suffering. Suffering doesn't disappear when you see through the self. Pain still happens, loss still hurts. But the extra layer of suffering, the why me, and this shouldn't be happening, and I can't handle this, that layer can dissolve. Pain becomes just pain, not my pain that defines me as a victim or a failure. Just sensation, just experience, arising and passing like everything else. You can meet it more directly without all the stories and resistance that usually amplify it. There's a famous Zen teaching, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Life doesn't radically change. You still have to do the dishes, pay the bills, show up for work, but your relationship to it all shifts. The grasping loosens. The resistance softens. You're still playing the game of life, but you're not taking it quite so personally anymore.
Some people worry that this will make them passive or detached. If nothing really matters in an ultimate sense, why bother? But that's a misunderstanding. The absence of a fixed self doesn't mean nothing matters. It means everything matters, but differently. You're free to care deeply about things without needing them to shore up your identity. You can work hard without needing to prove your worth. You can love without needing to possess. This is what the existentialists called authentic engagement. Choosing your values and commitments freely, not because you need them to define you, but because they express how you want to participate in existence. You're not looking for something to complete you or make you whole. You're already complete, or rather, wholeness was never the right concept to begin with. Living without a solid self is like learning to dance instead of march. Marching requires rigid formation, fixed roles, predetermined steps. Dancing is fluid, responsive, creative. You still have structure and skill, but there's space for improvisation, space for surprise, space for life to move through you in unexpected ways. You might notice that without a solid self to defend, fear decreases. Not all fear, healthy caution still operates, but the existential fear of not being enough, of losing yourself, of being exposed as a fraud, that diminishes. Because there's no fixed self that could be threatened, no image to protect, no story that must be maintained at all costs.
You might also notice that without a solid self to promote, pride becomes less important. You can celebrate successes without needing them to prove your worth. You can acknowledge failures without them defining you as a failure. Winning and losing become events, not verdicts on your identity. And here's something subtle but profound. Without a solid self, time feels different. Usually, we experience time as something we're moving through, a past behind us, a future ahead, and we're rushing forward, trying to get somewhere, to become someone, to achieve something. But when there's no separate self moving through time, there's just this moment, and then this moment, and then this moment. Not as stations on a journey, but as the whole thing, the only thing. This doesn't mean you stop planning or working toward goals. It means you stop living in some imagined future where you'll finally be happy, finally be yourself, finally have arrived. You recognize that this, right now, exactly as it is life. Not preparation for life, not a means to an end, life itself. There's a wonderful freedom in that, a lightness, because you're not carrying the weight of needing to become someone other than what you are. You're just here, being, responding, changing, living. And that's enough.
Not because you've achieved something or realized something or become enlightened, just because it's the truth of what's actually happening. You never were a solid, separate self. You always have been this fluid, interconnected, ever-changing process. You just didn't notice. And now, perhaps, you're starting to. So what does it mean to live without a self? It means living more lightly, more freely, more openly. It means meeting each moment fresh, without the burden of defending a fixed identity. It means relating to yourself and others with more flexibility and compassion. It means finding meaning in the present, rather than in some imagined future or idealized past. It means, paradoxically, that you become more fully yourself by releasing the grip on who you think you should be. And in that release, in that openness, in that freedom, there's a kind of peace. Not the peace of having figured everything out, but the peace of no longer needing to. The peace of allowing life to be what it is, including you. Which brings us to the end of our journey, back to where we started, but seeing differently. Back to the simple question, who are you? And the even simpler answer, maybe it doesn't matter as much as we thought.
Chapter 10. Peace in the Illusion. It's late now. The night is quiet. And here we are, at the end of a long exploration into one of the deepest questions humans have ever asked. What is the self? We've traveled far, through ancient temples and modern laboratories, through the insights of mystics and the discoveries of neuroscientists, through philosophical arguments and lived experience. And what have we found? That you are not what you think you are. That the solid, separate, continuous self you've always assumed you were is, in an important sense, an illusion, a construction, a story told so convincingly that you forgot it was a story. But here's what's strange and wonderful. Understanding this doesn't make you disappear. You're still here. Thoughts are still arising. The body is still breathing. Life is still happening. What changes is not the fact of your existence, but your relationship to it. You exist, but differently than you imagined. More fluid, more open, more interconnected, less like a noun and more like a verb. Not a thing, but a happening. Not a being, but a becoming. And there's such relief in this, such unexpected peace,
Because when you stop trying to maintain a fixed self, you can finally relax. You don't have to be consistent. You don't have to live up to your own image of yourself. You don't have to become someone or prove something. You can just be whatever you are in this moment, knowing that it will change, and that's okay. When you stop identifying with a separate self, loneliness shifts. You're not separate from the world, isolated inside a body, alienated from others. You're part of the same fabric of existence as everything else, made of the same stuff, arising from the same mystery. The boundaries are porous, permeable. You're still distinct, a unique pattern, a particular expression, but not separate, never separate. When you stop clinging to a permanent self, death becomes less terrifying. Not that it becomes easy or painless. Losing form will always involve loss. But the fear of annihilation softens when you realize there was never a solid thing to be annihilated in the first place. You've been changing, dissolving, and reforming your whole life. Death is just the final dissolving, the form releasing back into formlessness, the wave returning to the ocean, and you were never only the wave to begin with. The Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah used a beautiful metaphor. He held up a glass and said, "To me, this glass is already broken. I enjoy it. I drink out of it. It holds my water admirably. But I know that when the wind knocks it over or my elbow brushes it off the table, it will break. When I understand this, every moment with the glass is precious."
You are like that glass, already broken in the sense that nothing lasts, nothing is permanent, nothing is solid, but not yet broken in the sense that the form still holds. And in this brief time when the form holds this precious, improbable, temporary arising of the pattern you call you, there is beauty, there is meaning, there is the miracle of existence experiencing itself. The illusion of self is not a mistake. It's not a flaw in the system. It's a function, a useful tool that allowed humans to navigate complex social environments, plan for the future, build civilizations. The sense of being someone helped us survive and thrive. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem only arises when we mistake the tool for reality, when we reify the self, solidify it, cling to it, when we build our entire lives around defending and promoting something that was never solid to begin with. But when we see the illusion as illusion, when we recognize the self as a convenient fiction, a practical construct, a story rather than a fact, we can still use it without being used by it. We can play the role without mistaking ourselves for the role. We can have an identity without being imprisoned by it.
This is the middle way. Not annihilating the self, that's impossible and unnecessary. Not inflating the self, that's suffering. But seeing through the self while still functioning. Being no one in particular while still being whoever is needed in each moment. There's a Zen koan. What was your original face before your parents were born? It's asking, what are you before the story of you? Before the name, the history, the personality? What's there when all the constructed layers are stripped away? The koan doesn't have a conceptual answer. It's pointing to direct experience, to that awareness that's always here, always now, that somehow is reading these words but has no solid form, no fixed location, no definable essence. That awareness that you can't quite grasp because it's doing the grasping. That consciousness that you can't step outside of because there is no outside. Maybe that's what you really are, not the content of consciousness, the thoughts, feelings, sensations, story, but consciousness itself,
awareness itself. Not a thing that's aware, but awareness happening. Being itself, becoming itself, knowing itself through the temporary form called you. But even that is just another story, another concept, another attempt to capture something that can't be captured. The truth is simpler and stranger than any words can convey. You'd have to look for yourself. Sit quietly, watch, notice. See what's actually here when you're not thinking about it. And what